Tokyo Godfathers is the third cinematic masterpiece given to us by the late great Satoshi Kon, a man who was undoubtedly one of the greatest visionaries in the medium of anime, let alone film. However, this is arguably his strangest work, which is truly saying something if you've seen Perfect Blue, which we covered in October, or one of his other mind-bending works like Paprika, for instance. It's not strange in the sense that you walk away from it feeling like someone dosed you an hour and a half ago, but more in a sense that you don't feel that way. Tokyo Godfathers is a Christmas movie and about as far into left field as Kon could have gone considering his usual subject material, at least on the surface. Revolving around a trio of hobos who discover a dumpster baby, this film is as hilarious as it sounds while at the same time reaching into history, culture, society, consumerism, religion, faith, love, gender politics, and so much more. This movie is so jam-packed with references, symbolism, even shot-by-shot visual representation of a theme that it has been dissected and reviewed a million times in a million amazing ways. So, like always, I'm Mike, and this is Bonsai Pop, and I'm here to give you my very personal perspective on this film. This is Tokyo Godfathers. Let's get into it. What's up, guys? This is Mike coming at you from the heart, yo. It has been a rough year. I think that we all know that. And Tyler and I here at Bonsai Pop have done everything that we possibly could to bring you some entertainment and happiness every single week. It hasn't been easy for us either. YouTube was very cruel to us over the summer. I'd like to give a shout out to everybody who worked throughout this year, who went out and did their job every day in the face of a threat. You guys are awesome. You guys are heroes. It has not been easy. There has been multiple times where both of us just didn't want to get out of bed, just didn't want to do anything. But the thought that at the end of the week on Saturday morning we could bring you guys something to make you happy is what always drove us to continue to pump out a new video every single week. So in the spirit of the holidays and with tax season coming up, we would like you to consider looking into ways to help support the channel. Over the last couple months, we have started a merch initiative. We have partnered with Displate. We have our own merch line coming out on Teespring. It should be right below the video. And of course, as always, we have our very lovely Patreon, which is just full of the most amazing people who have actually gotten us through this year. There was a time where Tyler and I were very down and multiple members, like 30 members of the Patreon got together and made us a video that I can't even tell you how emotional it made us. It was called Operation Appreciation. It was the sweetest thing in the world. These are people that we're lucky to know. Anyway, for me and Tyler, from the bottom of our hearts, we would like to thank you for watching and supporting us all year long. You guys are the best, and on with the show. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start this off with a hot take. I think organized religion is bullshit.
Here we go. Bruh.
Okay, now that everyone who can't handle an opinion is gone, let me extrapolate a little bit. There's a million gods, a million faiths, and generally they stand on a pulpit claiming they are the one true faith and the one true God, and I'm just not into that kind of masturbatory self-aggrandizing. Faith is different, but I can't look past what organized religion has brought, like persecution of those deemed different, usually the poor, the queer, and those who don't fall into the narrow margins of acceptable. Oh, hey, look! A queer hobo. This is Hana, a transgender transient, and that look on her face, my friends, is rapture. Tokyo Godfathers opens up in a church musical, specifically the nativity or the birth of Christ. That's what Christmas is, you know? It's a celebration of the birth of Christ, Son of God, but also God. I don't know. Either way, it used to be a pagan tradition of the winter solstice, but it was usurped when the Catholics came into power and did the Roman thing of enveloping other cultures' traditions into their own. Sorry, you're probably looking like the rest of the people in the audience right now. A lot of them are also transients just looking for a free meal after the sermon. But Hana here is truly loving this show. Now this is Gin, he's here for the food. And then of course there's Miyuki, the youngest, who instead of showing up is spitting on people off a roof waiting for Gin and Hana to deliver her the food. As Miyuki's loogie slaps some dude in the face, he looks up to see a billboard with a crying angel on it. It's as if the tear fell off the blatant commercialism right onto his face. And as the trio eat, you get a good idea of who they are as people. Gin is a bitter, jaded old man, Miyuki is a hot-headed, rebellious teen, and Hana is a tough, but loving caregiver. So much so, she found Miyuki a Christmas present. However, when they go to retrieve it out of the garbage pile, it's gone. And while Gin and Miyuki get into a wrestling match after Gin chides her, the trio start to hear crying coming from the garbage. Following the sound, they lift a blanket to find a discarded baby who seems to glow enough to light up their faces, which are appropriately agape. After a little kerfluffle about the child, Hana begins walking away with the baby, and Gin comments saying that the cop shop is the other way. Hana turns around and says, "This is a Christmas present from God. She's our baby." Cue intro credits. All right, let's take a step back. So there's two ways to look at this film. One is a ridiculous romp through Tokyo as these three homeless people try to return a discarded baby back to its mother, and watching it like that is totally fine. It is a really funny movie. If you've ever played the Yakuza series, the story actually plays out like an extended side mission. It is that absurd. Now, on the other hand, this is Satoshi Kon. All of his work is social commentary, and the man had a lot to say with this film. You see, Christmas is a lot of things to a lot of people. However, I would argue that above and beyond anything else in the modern era, it is about shopping, buying, and selling. It's blatant commercial consumerism, which is echoed throughout the entire film. For an English-speaking audience, we see these neon streets of Tokyo much different than the people that can actually read the myriad of glowing signs. I know to my eye, they look like beautiful decorations, but they're ads. Also notice that all the credits are on signs, billboards, bus sides, etc. It is a statement without saying anything. Even the trio's house is partially made out of a billboard. There is advertisement everywhere throughout this film. However, Christmas is also a religious holiday, but I would like to note a couple things about the role of religion in Tokyo Godfathers. This is not a Christian film. Now, while Hana seems devout in her faith in God, it's not necessarily the Christian God. Note her paying her respects to the Shinto shrine later in the film. Her idea of God seems to permeate beyond religion, more into an incorporation of her being. There is, of course, a lot of Christian allegory in this film. For instance, the scene of the trio finding the baby whom they named Kyoko, translated as Holy Child, is a modern nativity. Remember, Jesus was born in a manger, which was essentially an old school equivalent of a dumpster. If you look at the shot, it's even set up like the nativity scene, making the trio effectively the three magi. However, when we look at baby Kyoko, she has a very specific marking on her forehead known in Japan as the byakugo, which is depicted on the Buddha as the third eye. It shows the ability to see beyond the reality which we normally perceive. And let us not forget that the original Shinto deity Amaterasu, goddess of the sun, is also represented here with the light cast from the child. Much like Japanese culture, all of these religions are wrapped together in this film. And I would also like to note that Christmas in Japan is mostly celebrated there for the novelty. Also, we're 6 minutes into the film. Speaking of which, I'm not going to be spoiling this film. I will spoil parts of this film, but I am going to make sure that there is much for you to discover as you watch it. But just know, if you want to go in completely blind, go in completely blind and come back. That being said, another important thing to note is why each of these individuals are on the street. Gin is a father and husband. However, his drinking and gambling got him into debt, which he began to cover by taking loans. Now, without getting into an hour-long explanation of Japanese loans and policies, just know that predatory loans are extremely common in Japan and come with insane interest rates. The easiest ones to get have the worst rates and are generally run by the Yakuza. Gin's debt caused him to leave his family voluntarily. This is actually not uncommon in Japan at all due to lingering cultural ideas of honor and a patriarchal society. Gin left in shame because the simple idea of showing his face to the family he failed was too much for him. He would rather live on the street, dirty and cold, than go home a failure. Now, Hana, on the other hand, went to the streets after beating a customer at the Queen bar she worked at for disrespecting her, and later her boyfriend passed away. She felt like she had nothing left, couldn't go back to work, and just took to the streets to live out the rest of her days. Obviously, there's societal things that go along with this. This movie was made in the early 2000s. Her being transgender obviously created complicated issues societally, you know how it goes. Then there is Miyuki, the daughter of a police officer who ran away from her home after stabbing her father. Now in the flashback, we see her mother praying in the corner while Miyuki stands over her father with a knife, and instead of looking sad or scared, he just looks pissed, likely because a woman stood up to him, a woman he should be in control of. It's also important to take into consideration two other things: Miyuki's weight and the fact that this assault was over her father throwing out her cat. Weight is a social issue in Japan as well as other Asiatic cultures like Korea. For instance, I would be considered fat to pretty damn fat in Asia. However, standing out in any way in Japanese society can lead to bullying and isolation. It's very likely that because of her weight, Miyuki's cat was her best friend and greatest comfort. It's also likely that due to Japan's culture of overworking and single income families, that Miyuki almost never saw her father. So a man she barely knew threw out her best friend like it was nothing, and she let out all her rage on him and ran away. Meanwhile, her mother, who she clearly thinks of as weak, is just left praying in the corner. Now these three have taken on the task of somehow returning an anonymous baby to its random missing mother in one of the most highly populated cities in the world, and of course, hijinks ensue. But it's not all fun and games along the way, mostly because being homeless sucks. I also left home when I was 17 voluntarily and lived like a rat for about 5 years. See Gin take a used butt out of an ashtray? Been there. Dumpster sandwiches? Totally been there. Never stolen offerings off a grave, but I totally would have if we did that here. Also, note that the offerings are all commercial products instead of traditional Japanese offerings. It's just another point towards Kon's thoughts about the commercialization of faith. But what sucked the most about being homeless was the shame. While I was doing literally nothing, my friends were graduating, going off to nice colleges, starting their lives, going through rites of passages I never experienced: prom, graduation, getting a car, moving to big cities, living in dorms. I cut a lot of communication at the time with my family because they didn't understand why I had left. I felt like I was being judged. I never felt like I could tell them what happened. I was kicked out of school twice for not showing up for so long. I was always dirty and hungry and embarrassed, especially when I ran into someone I knew. I lived off the generosity of other people, which I could never repay. It's easy when you have no stability to get locked into a cycle of depression and self-loathing, making just getting out of bed next to impossible, assuming you have one that night. When you're stuck in the dark like that, it is almost impossible to see the light. So as the trio trek across Tokyo following their leads, there is a point where Gin is separated from Hana and Miyuki. Stumbling around drunk and hating himself, he comes across a dying old homeless man illuminated in the light of a shop. He brings the old man back to that guy's squat, which is covered in pinwheels spinning in the wind. The dying man's last request is to have a drink of Gin's sake, and as he does, he is momentarily illuminated. He asks Gin to get rid of his mementos because some people will be hurt if it's known who he is after he passes. And with that, he rolls over dead and the pinwheels stop spinning. However, it's a gag and the old man wakes up, asks for another drink, and once again the pinwheel starts spinning. His face is once more aglow, but this time after he drinks, it's truly the end. The lights fade and the pinwheels cease to turn in the wind, and this is a major turning point for Gin, where the reality of committing to a transient life is thrust in his face. He's truly looking at one of his own possible futures, and I saw a lot of that myself while I was out there. ODs, super stunts, people dying without accomplishing anything. It was a real eye-opener. Now, if you think I'm overreaching about light playing an effect in this film, check this out. After leaving the dead man's squat, Gin is assaulted by a group of young men just because he's homeless. And this is another huge issue in Japan specifically. Homeless people are treated very badly there, far worse than in America. Again, because they're seen as being complete failures with no honor. They're trash, scum. But just watch the lights up in the office windows during this altercation. They are legitimately like health bars in a game of Tekken as Gin is beaten and loses. The teens take his only possessions, which is 30,000 yen, about $300, which he had saved up to give to his daughter. As Gin manages to get back to his feet to chase after them to get his money back, the lights ramp back up as if he's coming back to life. And this light in the film is the light of God. It is the light of faith and hope and divine intervention. And as he passes out in an alley from his injuries, he is then again illuminated by an angel who is really just a drag queen, but this results in his reunion with his friends in a twist of fate. There is in fact quite a few little miracles in this film. For example, in a small convenience store, this drunk guy's being a total asshole, so they take it outside just as an ambulance careens into the store. However, no one is hurt. But I have a little story about maybe some possible divine intervention. When I was on my own, I was about 18. I was in a horrific car accident. My friends and I were putting shaving cream in mailboxes in the middle of the night when someone came outside and scared the shit out of us. So we bolted into the truck. It was a bench seat in the front. None of us had time to get buckled. I was in the middle, but in the panic, my friend lost control of the truck and we slid off the road into a tree. The truck flipped. My shoes went flying off from the impact. My other friend went out the passenger window, which smashed when the truck hit the ground. But we were all totally fine. I had a bruise on my thigh. When the cops showed up, they told us that a half an inch to the left and we all would have gone out the windshield into the tree. And also that we should be kissing God's ass. That is a quote. The cops were so happy that we were alive, they didn't charge us with tampering with mailboxes. Honestly, I probably should have just been kissing God's ass that I was white in that situation. But things like that really do make you think. Now, if you haven't figured it out yet, Tokyo Godfathers isn't really about Christmas. It's about love. There's religious allegory mixed with social commentary and comedic instances of miracles happening, but what it all comes down to is love and that little divine intervention. All three of our heroes have an opportunity to make amends throughout the film with their estranged families at one point or another, completely due to happenstance brought about by their quest to return Kyoko to her mother. Hana at her old bar, Gin with his daughter at the hospital after Hana gets sick, and in the end when Miyuki sees her father. However, the ending is completely open-ended. We don't necessarily know what happens to anyone, but I think the message is more that your family is always there, no matter what family that is, if you follow the subtle signs. And at this point, you should be asking yourself, Mike, what about your goofy ass title, Kamikaze? Come on. So let's tie this knot with a story. A long time ago, most of Asia was ruled over by the Mongolian Empire. Naturally, wanting it all, they eventually set their sights on Japan. So they launched a massive invasion, which was met with a stiff defense. However, not stiff enough to hold the Mongols off forever. But before the Mongols could regroup, a completely out of season typhoon swept in, destroying a huge portion of their fleet and sending them home. Not to be stymied by bad luck, the Mongols invaded again a couple years later, making sure it was the absolute opposite of typhoon season. They left with the second largest naval attack fleet of all time, which was only overtaken by D-Day in the 20th century. And off the coast of Japan, they were hit by another random monstrous typhoon, which destroyed their fleet for a second time. The damage to both invasion attempts was so catastrophic and so unprecedented, the Mongols never came back. The odds of this happening are incalculably low. Thus, it was dubbed the Kamikaze, the divine wind. The winds of change affect us all in different ways. When I was 20, I met a girl who saw the position I was in and took complete control and advantage of me. I was blown away that someone could find me attractive even though I was a total bum. She got me a good paying but insanely taxing job physically and mentally, where I was gone literally all the time and proceeded to suck the life out of me for 2 years. You see, while I was at work, she was out using and cheating on me. She never kept a job, and in the end, she stole about $30,000 from me. Eventually, I caught on, but I had an apartment now, and it was in her name, of course. I had a car. Like, how was I gonna go back to the streets? When it all came to a head, I remember walking around town. It was April. It was windy as hell, and that's when I finally called my grandmother. At one point in Tokyo Godfathers, baby Kyoko gets kidnapped, and the trio desperately race to recover her from this crazy lady. And as they do, their path is illuminated by lights from the streets and houses and apartments. Things happen that I don't want to spoil, but Kyoko falls from a roof, and without a second thought of her own safety, Hana jumps off to catch her. Losing her balance on the lower ledge, she falls, catching hold of a banner, which of course then rips. And as the pair fall towards the street, a huge gust of wind comes flying down the throughway, catching the banner like a parachute and gently lowering the two to the street below. As Hana floats down, she catches the rising sun, showering her in its radiance. You see, Christmas is a lot of things to a lot of people, and to me, Christmas is my grandmother. After my call with her where I explained everything and begged her to forgive me for not keeping in touch, she and my papa took me in without a second thought. She loves Christmas. She is Christmas. This is her favorite thing in the world. She looks forward to it from December 26th to December 24th the next year. She literally spends all year planning for Christmas, thinking about her family. She's the only person I know who has turned shopping into an art. She's also the only 70-year-old woman I know who will flip you off and moon you or give you a wet willy or tell you to go fuck yourself. She taught me a lot about life. And she took care of me a lot when I was a kid. She's my favorite person on this planet, and she and my papa saved me. Without her, without them, there would likely be no Bonsai Pop and possibly no me. Right now, the virus is pretty rampant where I am, and it may be the first Christmas day where I don't get to see my grandmother. So I would like to dedicate this video to her and my papa. And as far as this movie goes, if you haven't seen Tokyo Godfathers, again, I haven't really spoiled it for you. I deliberately left out huge chunks of the film that are not only heartfelt but totally hilarious. I left out instances of the light playing roles and scenes. I would love to see what you find within it. I'd also like to make a note that the score is phenomenal and not only worth paying attention to, but going out and listening to on its own. However, the message in the film is clear. God, whatever that means, works in mysterious ways, and a little faith can go a long way, no matter what you put it in. The Kamikaze not only saved Japan, but it also saved Hana and Kyoko. A little ice in the right spot saved me from getting wrapped around a tree like human garland. We only have so much time on this earth, and the idea is to spend it wisely. Remember that you take nothing with you to the grave. And beyond the billboards and the products, there are people. Some of them are your family who love you, or new family waiting to make bonds of love with in the future. Life is about living, and no matter how far you run, you cannot escape reality, and you can't escape love. Happy holidays, everybody. Hey, this is Mike. If you're still here, thank you so much, and just know that you are a very special kind of viewer who watches through the whole video. If you're interested in supporting the channel, I recommend going to the description and looking at the links that we have in there. As always, we have to thank our very special patron of the week, Mark Likes Music, and our Super Saiyan God of the Week, Omni Penguin Mecha, as well as our top patron, Alpha Sigma. Guys, thank you so much for supporting the channel. I recommend checking out a bunch of other videos that we've done, and then subscribing to the channel if you like it. Follow us on social media, and we will be back next week with a brand new video. Thanks so much. Goodbye.